take a minute and look at some of those. The things that we are wearing there and what I'm wearing up front here are hand woven. They're I don't know what the correct term, hand stitched. They're handmade. And that's pretty impressive. This is the Myanmar contingent with the evangelist translator on my left, the pastor, and a missionary on my right and on the far left. We did get to go to Myanmar. When we got there and we were told that we couldn't go in because of the situation, and we were within walking distance, I just said to Sepu, who was the man with the hat, the politician, and David's on my other side, I said to Sepu, is there no way that I can't just step across the border, just step in and touch the dirt of Myanmar, just to say that I had been there? And he said, well, I'll see what I can do. And so the next morning, before we left, he said, get up, we're going to Myanmar. So we drove over to the border. His guards had to stay on the Indian side. We were not allowed to take cell phones or cameras or anything like that. So I handed my camera to one of the guys, the evangelist translator from Myanmar, and he brought it across and was able to snap 3 pictures before the security at the border patrol there said, no pictures. And then he put the camera away, and we quietly walked away with our 3 quick pictures that we had gotten. So I'm very pleased to be able to say that I did at least touch the soil, and I did bend down and touch the dirt with my hand, just to say that I have touched the soil in Myanmar. Sepu, the politician, invited us to his house, David and I and his family. To my right is a man named Jeremy who will be spending time with me when I'm in Delhi in just a couple days, and I'll be showing you some of those pictures. And he has hopes and aspirations of coming to America to study here in a theological seminary to get his PhD and go back and open a school, much like David has done on your far right, my left. He has opened up that school. And I didn't tell you very much about that school, but I will be telling you about it in just a minute. This is a picture of our room on the way back from Moreh to Manipur, to Imphal. And David is right now complaining about the horrible odor of the blankets under which he is laying. And he is complaining that it's so cold that he needs the blankets, but it's probably one of the dirtiest rooms I've ever stayed in. I didn't use blankets. I curled up under my coat. I laid my towel across the pillow, and I just prayed that there were no moving things that would latch themselves onto go for hitch a ride for any amount of time. So preaching was the first focus of my time in India. Teaching was the second. And actually, teaching took up a lion's share portion of my time the week that I was in Manipur. I taught 2 classes. Each class lasted 2.5 hours. So I spent 5 hours a day teaching. The first class that I taught was on preaching, homiletics, how to preach, how to get your idea, how to develop your idea. And the second class that I taught was basically a virtual tour of Israel. Many of these people will never get to go to see the Holy Lands. And so it was Holy Land pictures and geography and how it ties in with the scriptures. It's very similar to the class that I taught here last year, or I guess it was a 1.5 years ago now. But I just nuanced it for seminary students. And this was the class. I had about 100 students per class. Each of the students in the seminary was required to take either preaching or the virtual tour class. So I had about 200 students altogether. And then the third thrust of my time in Imphal was evangelism. And what you're seeing here is one of 2 groups of children that I got the chance to share the gospel with. 500 in each group, and in total, about 1,000 students. Of that 1,000, I was told that 60% were not Christian. So that's about 600 people who are not Christian. And I got the chance to evangelize, share the gospel, and ask for a commitment of faith. And of those, 650 students committed themselves. We estimate about 50 students committed themselves for the first time to Christ. Now, one of the things that I wanted to make sure, and I think it's irresponsible to go about spreading the gospel without any follow-up, was that there is some sort of a discipleship program at the school. And I talked with David about this. And he said that the teachers are equipped to disciple students. They know that after an evangelist comes and has a call of altar call that they are to follow up with the children, that they ask who responded to that call, then they pray with them, they disciple them, they teach them, and so there is a setup for the follow-up. So some of those students that walked out of there that day walked out as believers for the first time with an eternal security and eternal hope, which was very humbling, awesome and humbling. Every time that I have an altar call, I get very sweaty palms. I think it's Satan whispering in my ear saying, "Do you really want to do that? Is that really what you want to do? What if nobody responds?" And every time I ask, I get nervous. I doubt whether or not I should. And then every time I ask, if there's anybody who wants to believe, there's always somebody. And every time I'm always humbled and awed that God would use me to reach that person today. Because I know it's not me, it's God. And so it's a humbling experience. So, just to tell you a little bit about the culture and the experiences that I had while I was there, I wanted to show you a few pictures of different things that are happening. Here they are chopping wood for the kitchen. They burn wood for cooking and cooking alone. And in case you can't tell what he is hacking away at there, it is a stump of a tree. They chop and chop and chop until they can break off little bits of it, and then they stack it up until it's used. And they chop up the stumps. They don't use the logs because the logs are too precious. They use the logs in building. So they'll chop down the tree, they'll use the logs, they'll saw them up, and I watched them take it from a log to a board, to planed, to a window frame, it was just amazing. Each day I'd watch, and they'd be doing the next step, and it was very cool to experience that. It's not like they went over to Home Depot and picked up a load of lumber. They went over to the home forest and picked out a log and said, "This log looks long and straight. We could use a lot of this." And they chopped it down and brought it back. These women are sorting rice. They're going through the rice, and they're picking out the bad ones. So they get a big pile of rice, and they go through and they pick out the hard ones, the dry ones, and they throw them away. And then they cook up the good ones. And this is the school students. I told you I would tell you a little bit about the school. The school that David runs from elementary all the way through high school, has a college and a seminary. Right now he has about 1,000 students in the elementary and high school, and by 2013 he plans on tripling that. That's what all the new building is for. He's planning a new building of residency as well, and he's working on getting a grant for that. So these are students at lunch, and they do eat outside on the days when it's not raining, and they do squat when they eat. There are no tables, and many of them eat with their hands. It was funny, I was over there, and I was talking with a person about the difference between eating with your hands and eating with silverware. He said, "Well, it's like my parents always said. God gave you two perfectly good utensils. Why would you want to waste it by getting a metal utensil? Why would you want to dirty a metal utensil?" And I laughed, and I said, "That's funny, because my mom always said, don't eat like an animal, use it eat like a civilized human being." So we were laughing at the things that our parents told us to convince us to do things their way. Many of them do eat with their hands here. He also took me to another site about an hour to an hour and a half drive away. This is another school that he opened in 2008, hoping to branch out his campuses and start another school. But this school did not do well. He closed it down, and he is hoping to transform this into a hospital. Now, I asked him several questions about this future endeavor. I said, "So what made the school fail?" He said, "The school failed because I'm Naga." He said, "I'm Naga, so I'm this tribe, and the town is majority this other tribe," and I don't remember what the other tribe was. And so because we're different tribes, they didn't want to support me as a Naga. They felt like sending their children to my school. The parents spread the word, "This school is run by Naga, don't support it." And so he said, that's why those students came. And I was amazed at how much tribal animosity there was. I kept seeing it again and again and again, tribal animosity with these guys, this tribe or that tribe, Yangmai, Naga, Dunka, Dunkel, all different tribes, and it was like, you stick with your tribe. But I said, so if the school failed, what would make you think a hospital would work? And he said, well, in this town there are 11 schools to choose from. Many of them are run by the same tribe as the people in this, and some of them are government. The government-run schools are always the worst schools. He says, the private schools are always better, or almost always better. And he says, so I tried to open a school here with other schools to compete with them, and because of the tribal thing, they went with the other tribes. I said, so what makes you think they're going to want to send their sick people to your hospital? He said, well, in this town there's one other hospital, and it is the government hospital. We will provide better health care for them. He said, if they want good health care, they will come to the hospital. He said, their alternative is to drive the 2.5 hours to Infall and to go to the hospital that's run there by a tribe other than their own tribe. So for convenience and for quality health care, he said they will come to this hospital. So he's looking to get grants to start that up and get that going. And he's hoping this is the rest of that campus. Just lost my train of thought. So I asked David for permission to celebrate our last night together on campus by having communion. And it was very unusual. They don't have communion during their chapel. They only have it Sunday mornings. And he graciously granted me permission to do that. And it was a sweet time together that I was able to serve communion with the seminarians that I've been teaching all week. But much of our time was spent together in dialogue, and we obviously ate 3 meals together and sat around and talked a lot, and I got to interact with a lot of the teachers. David's on the left, and Chip Owen is on the right. We oftentimes would sit around that little fire, the little charcoal fire, and share stories and drink tea to keep warm in the evenings. In the afternoons, we would meet outside and talk in between classes or in between chapel and class. So there was a lot of fellowship that went on as well. I'm sorry about the fuzziness of this picture. Every picture that I took of this woman turned out fuzzy. She is a woman from Delhi who is an investor of sorts, and she's a Hindu. And so we were eating dinner, and we were getting ready to go to chapel. I was getting ready to preach, and I said to her, why don't you come with me to church? And she said, sure, I'll do that sometime. When is it? I said, right now. She said, oh, right now. You mean like now? I was like, yeah, now. She's like, oh, you mean like tonight now? I'm like, yeah, tonight now. She's like, oh, you're going there? I'm like, yeah, come with me. She's like, okay, I'll come. And so she came. So she got to hear the gospel. I did intentionally make sure the gospel was included in that message, even though I was preaching to seminarians. I made sure to include the gospel that night. So that was her only church service that she has been to where there was a message given. She said she had been to a church before for some sort of a music program, but had never heard preaching. And she said she really enjoyed it. And I said, could you understand what I was saying? She said, yes, I understood very clearly. She said, all your gestures were very helpful, and you moved, by acting the things out, it helped me to understand things very clearly. So she seemed to appreciate that. I don't know that she certainly didn't in any way express a desire to become a Christian, but I'm hoping that I at least planted some seeds there. All sorts of great food, all sorts of wonderful, delicious food. I'm not going to tell you all the things that I ate so as not to offend the more sensitive palates among you. But if you are curious, Walt, you can certainly ask me later, and I will gladly share with you all the interesting and unusual foods that I got the chance to try while in India. Our last night together, I did get to meet with the other instructors and have a farewell dinner with them and take a picture with them. Peter is on the far left, who traveled with me in Nepal, and David is on the far right, who is the president of the seminary of the school and the head pastor. So at the end of my trip, I got to spend a couple days in New Delhi and around New Delhi traveling. I traveled down to Agra, where this is the Agra Fort, which is in line of sight of the Taj Mahal. But the Agra Fort itself is a spectacle, is a sight to behold. You can spend several hours there just exploring the grounds of the fort itself, and it is just beautiful and wonderful. You can spend a whole day there. Like I said, though, from the fort, you can see the Taj Mahal. It's in line of sight, and you can see lots of monkeys seeing the Taj Mahal. Monkeys are everywhere. Hindus, I should say, do not eat. Most devout Hindus do not eat meat, so monkeys abound and are